Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the expenditure capabilities of LeaseControl, specifically recording those minimum expenditures that cannot be calculated. My name is Lucy Oborn. I'm the LeaseControl Manager here at Maxwell Geoservices and very pleased to be presenting today's webinar. This webinar will predominantly focus on team efficiencies in a global context, noting relevance to the financial team and potential integration into your company's GIS. We'll be covering off why the feature is useful, and we're going to be using Quebec, Western Australia and Queensland as examples. And I just want to remind you that these case studies are relevant to other regions throughout the world, so please listen to these carefully, and that way you can find how they're relevant to your particular business. We're also going to be going through a workflow overview, entering forward commitments per title, and generating reports on financial commitments. We're going to be going through the features first. A reminder that our selection of case studies are based on client feedback. Therefore, as always, we welcome you to review the selection of webinars on our website and request further case studies that are relevant to your region of operations and company policies. Of LeaseControl's 5 modules, this particular expenditure is captured within the Leases module, which traditionally handles mineral, petroleum and land titles. Further expenditure commitments relating to contracts, for example, farming arrangements, are handled separately through the Agreements module. However, today's webinar will focus on those contained within the Leases module. This is where we store data relating to commitments, which is drawn upon when completing expenditure compliance requirements, which we refer to in LeaseControl as actions. We will now introduce you to today's case studies. Quebec has a unique system whereby an expenditure report is required to be lodged in respect of each cell upon which a mineral title encroaches. Each of these instances has a commitment which differs from time to time. It is necessary to record these commitments and the value reported on a per cell basis. Therefore, we've set up a LeaseControl record for each cell a title encroaches upon, which is linked to the mineral title by way of the Related Leases tab. There's more on this in the relationship and bulk update feature in our webinar, Group Expenditure Reporting. If this commitment can be determined by way of calculation, for example $10,000 per cell, we wouldn't need to use the non-calculable override feature. In this case, however, we're assuming calculation is not possible. In Western Australia, however, almost all commitments can be calculated with the government making the methodology publicly available. These are duly entered into the lease configuration settings, which is covered in our earlier expenditure webinar. However, there are certain circumstances where the resultant calculation requires to be overridden. These include where part of a title has been relinquished, or where the government hasn't approved an exemption from expenditure, which are typically granted on a period of between 1 to 5 years on certain titles. Queensland has the most common arrangement, where this commitment is set through agreement with the government. Like many regions, this is determined on the basis of an application, such as an application for grant, renewal, transfer of title. These are then enforceable as conditions of grant. Such regions may also wish to refer to our earlier webinar on expenditure offsets. I'm now going to provide you with an overview of the workflow you can achieve using the expenditure override feature before showing you the specifics of how you set it up. Where you have commitments that can be calculated, you enter these into the configuration settings. Where you can't, or where you wish to override this calculation on a year-by-year basis, relevant data is entered into the expenditure grid per lease record. The commitment summary within each record, which ordinarily looked to your configuration settings, now reflects your override entries. Now when you complete your expenditure action, it preempts the commitment based on your inputs. Showing you how to enter these forward commitments is very quick. Within each lease record, you have a Financials tab and an Expenditure sub-tab. Within this Expenditure sub-tab, you're able to enter forward expenditure into the top row, then press Enter on your keyboard to move it into the grid. You continue in this fashion until you are happy all known forward commitments are entered. To have this reflected in your summary at the top, simply click the $sign and your forward commitment will update. Remember that moving forward, each time you lodge an expenditure report, this will automatically update these fields, so you won't have to manually trigger the update. The only thing to remember is leave the expenditure lodged blank. That's how LeaseControl knows this entry is a forward commitment as opposed to you're recording your actual commitment. You can see that this is very simple. Yes, it makes a huge contribution to data accuracy, transparency and efficient workflows. Now you have the data contained within LeaseControl, you can include it in all your usual LeaseControl reports. The relevant browser screen is updated, facilitating quick summary reports of vital data through click and drag functions. Additionally, both the inbuilt Query Builder and Report Designer capture the new commitment data, making generation of specific reports quick and easy. After importing your actual expenditure to date, comparison reports can be generated. Remember, of course, that LeaseControl licensing can permit generation of reports such as these without the user being provided edit functionality. This facilitates wider company inclusion without risking the validity of your data. And that completes today's training. Very quick, very comprehensive. Thank you very much for your attendance, and please be advised that the next LeaseControl webinar will be on the configuration hierarchy. This is where you set up your localities, lease types and agreement types. We'll be looking at improving workflow efficiencies through correct structuring, in addition to simplifying your views and related title matters, such as inclusion of work program or environmental approvals and transitional provisions for those hard to manage regions. We would appreciate user feedback on our webinars to ensure we maintain a high standard of service and implementation for such purpose. Or should you have any queries or requests for additional training or mentoring, I welcome you to contact one of our Maxwell Geoservices global offices. I'm going to give you a moment to enter any questions you may have into your GoToWebinar sidebar, and then we'll go through these. While you're doing so, I'd like to remind you that we welcome your input as to further topics, and that way we can make sure the webinars remain of value to you. You're welcome to email any requests through to leasecontrol@maxgeo.com or contact our offices for discussion. We still have a few people also to send in for the version 1.8 upgrade. Just remember the features you saw here today are based on 1.8, and therefore if they're required, please send us through your application form to upgrade or alternatively contact me and I can make sure you have access to that document. As there are no queries, that concludes our webinar. Thank you for everyone's attendance. Have a lovely day and know that I look forward to speaking to you again at our next webinar, if not before.